Hello, everyone, and welcome to Walking Through the Bible. If you want to know who someone truly is, you don't observe them when things are going well. You observe them when things are going bad. Do they treat people well, or do they treat people shamefully? Is their speech seasoned with salt, or do they curse and swear? Do they still follow the rules, or do they bend them simply because everybody else is? Satan said that Job, if he lost all his blessings, would curse God to his face. Job lost all his possessions and then blessed God. Satan was wrong. But that didn't mean Satan would stop trying, for in Job 2 we get another scene that would test the faith of Job. So if you have a Bible with you, you can turn to the book of Job. Turn to Job chapter 2. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 13. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Job chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where did you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and walking back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? And still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause." So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." And he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. For they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him, and to comfort him. And when they raised their eyes from afar, and did not recognize him, they lifted their voices and wept. And each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head towards heaven. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was very great. Job 2 is the sequel to Job 1. We're not going to talk about who the sons of God are again, for they are angels, and why they came to present themselves before God, for we covered that in lesson 3 of this series, which can be found at youtube.com/East End Church of Christ. The scene itself is strikingly similar. God is there, the angels are there, and so is Satan. God again tells Satan, who has been wandering this earth seeking whom he may devour, if he has been able to turn Job, for Job was still an upright man, a man who feared God and shunned evil, even though his possessions had been taken away from him without cause, meaning without sufficient reason. Now, I'd like to say in passing, verse 3 makes it seem as if God was incited to take this action against Job against his will. In other words, God was forced by Satan to do this. Such is not the case. God is not the one who caused this, nor did God desire this to happen. But Satan is always trying to turn those to his side who are not on his side. He is trying to prove to God that God's standards are too high and that nobody can meet them. God was going to prove Satan wrong, not only to Satan, but to his angels as well. In order to do this, God allowed Satan to act here. God knew Job and knew what Job would do. In the end, this made Job's faith stronger, but that doesn't mean that God took pleasure in it, nor that Job found it pleasurable after the fact either. But this suffering would also have the effect where Job could prove to himself that he could remain faithful, and that God didn't abandon him either. What we're learning here is that God allows us to suffer for 3 reasons. The first of which is the most obvious, because we actively have sinned and he is seeking to reprove us. Job's suffering was not for this reason, but we have seen people suffer for sin constantly in our walk through the Bible. The next two reasons are tied together, which is to test our faith, knowing that we will pass the test and God's goodness will be vindicated and our faith in God be strengthened, or to test our faith, knowing that we will fail, but using it as an opportunity for us to learn humility, to learn how to avoid sin, and to learn the need for always trusting in God and His grace. Now again, we need to remember, God didn't cause our suffering, but He allows it to happen. Now, if we fail the test, will God abandon us? No, for through His word, He will actively seek our repentance, which, if we have any faith in God at all, we will do and return back to God. Now, this last part may be counterintuitive. God is seeking our salvation. Wouldn't He shield the weak from that which might cause them to fall into sin? But if God did that, how would the weak ever grow strong? When a child is learning to walk, the child is going to have to be allowed to fall so that they can learn to pick themselves back up. Now, we don't let the child take the stairs so they can fall down them and break their bones. We place them on level ground, knowing that if they fall, it might hurt for a moment, but they aren't in such a way that they can't get themselves back up. And once they learn that they can fall, they will grow stronger so that they will learn how not to fall. Now, should a child not choose to get themselves back up, they will never learn to walk. But that's not what children who want to learn to walk will do. God allows us to be tempted, but only that which we are able to bear. Sometimes we will sin and other times we won't, but we need God's grace no matter which result comes. With suffering, sometimes that test of our faith will be passed, and sometimes the test will be failed. But God's grace is always there for the child of God who continues their walk in faith. In Job 1, Satan was proven wrong, for Job passed the test, but Satan was still confident that Job's faith was superficial. For if given the choice, lose your possessions or lose your life, man would gladly lose his possessions if he could save his life. He might even praise God for sparing his life. If God allowed Satan to touch the body of Job, something that was disallowed in chapter 1, then Job would certainly curse God to his face. God's goodness was again challenged, but God knew Job. And so, for Satan to be proven wrong, not only to Satan but to the angels of heaven, God allowed Satan to afflict Job's body, but not kill him. In other words, whatever disease that was afflicted on Job, that disease couldn't kill Job. That Satan was able to do this again shows us that Satan has real power, but he is not all-powerful, because his power can be restrained. And so the affliction that Satan chose was to send boils on Job from head to toe. What is being described here is likely a burning, ulcerous swelling, a severe form of leprosy that would be incurable at the time. The boils were so bad that Job would take broken pieces of ceramics to scrape the boils off in order to provide any sort of relief, though certainly there was not much. Job was in great pain and in great grief. He had lost all of his possessions, and now his health was gone too, leaving him miserable. It's no wonder that his wife came to him and told him that it is obvious that his faith in God was useless. Look at all that has happened. Now, of course, usually lost in the discussion of her is the fact that she lost all her children too. So I'm sure she is in tremendous grief, just as Job is. And so while her words were foolish, and her faith was not seemingly as strong, if it existed at that time at all, it is understandable from a worldly standpoint as to why she said what she said. Job, though, was not going to have it. If they gladly received blessings from the Lord, then they shouldn't complain if they also received adversity. That statement is almost Newtonian in its depth, for Newton's third law of motion states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Well, even though this is not always true with blessings and adversity, in Job's case it was. He had been blessed greatly by God, but God had allowed Satan to afflict him equally as great, it seemed. Yet in this, Job did not curse God. He did not sin with his lips. Why? Because his faith in God was strong enough to realize that even in this horrible state, he still hadn't lost his salvation. He could still serve God, and God could still be pleased with him. He may not fully understand everything, but he could understand that. There are few living on this planet that ever endured what Job endured. But if we had to do so, would we have this type of faith? It's easy to say that we would, but we should be strengthening our faith while we can, so if we are faced with that test, we will be able to pass it. Now, at the end of chapter 2, Job is joined by his 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They are from the surrounding region and will play a major part in the rest of this book. When they arrive, they can hardly recognize Job because of all of his suffering, which grieves them deeply. They sit with him for 7 days and 7 nights, saying nothing, for Job was in great grief. When something is wrong, we always are searching for words of comfort. But sometimes the best thing to do is just to be with someone. Being silent, but being there with them. That's what these 3 friends did here. That silence would break in chapter 3, though, and so we invite you back for the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we will be taking our 2-week winter break, and will return, the Lord willing, on Monday, March 24th, 2025. When we return, we'll take up with Job chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. We hope that you'll come back and join us for that discussion, when we will continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. We thank you for watching Walking Through the Bible today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below. But if you like this video, we ask that you consider subscribing to our channel so you won't miss out on other videos in our series, as well as share this video among your friends so that the saving message of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.